So, of course, tonight marks another episode of Impact Wrestling on AXS TV, and there is some Impact Wrestling news that I do want to talk about. Before tonight's episode, I was going to do a video today talking about all of the reactions to the big WWE releases this week. The video has been filmed, the voiceover has been done, the editing has been done, but this Impact Wrestling news has just broken in the last sort of hour or so, so it is something I want to talk about before tonight's show, and we can talk about it tomorrow as well when we break it down, when we actually find out who this mystery person is, because there is some big news about a former WWE performer set to debut tonight on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. Now, this is a report coming from Mike Johnson of PW Insider, who has broken quite a few Impact Wrestling stories in the past. He is reporting that Impact Wrestling sources have indicated that a former WWE superstar will make his, I think that's important there, his debut tonight on Impact in a vignette. Now, PW Insider is reporting that it's a talent who, quote, never really got a fair chance during his time in WWE. That's certainly interesting. So who could this be? I don't know, is the simple answer. We don't know. It's a really interesting story when it comes to this mystery person because we don't know who it is. And I know obviously people's imaginations will run wild, and that tends to be the case in the world of pro wrestling, certainly when it's been the case of lots of surprises recently. We can rule out definitely who it isn't. Of course, it's nobody that's been released yesterday. It's not going to be Braun Strowman. It's not going to be Aleister Black. It's not going to be Buddy Murphy. It's not going to be Lana. It's not going to be Ruby Riott. It's not going to be Santana Garrett. It's not going to be any of those names because, as is the case when any WWE superstar is released from their contract early, there is a 90-day non-compete clause, except in extenuating or special circumstances. In the case of Andrade, of course, he wasn't subject to that 90-day non-compete clause. Why? I don't know. I don't know if that's ever really been publicly confirmed, but he's not subject to one. If your contract was set to expire, your contract would expire when it expired and you wouldn't be subject to those 90-day non-compete clauses. So in the case of, say, Alexander Wolf, who was recently released from WWE, in reality, his contract was expiring in June. I can't remember for the life of me which date it was in June, but his contract was expiring in June, and he was essentially told, we're not renewing your deal. So his contract didn't necessarily, he wasn't released from his contract just expired. So in that case, he's not subject to a 90-day non-compete clause. It's just a case of once his contract expires, he's free to do whatever he wants to do. We also know when it comes to NXT talent, if you're on an NXT contract or a developmental contract, you're not subject to a 90-day non-compete clause in the same way that you were if you were on a main roster contract. So some talents that were released by WWE from the NXT point of view, if they were still on a developmental contract, they only have to adhere to 30 days once they've been released. That's why the likes of Deonna Purrazzo last year could show up to Impact Wrestling much earlier than some of the people that were released, say, in April, and they had to wait until July. Obviously, it's also not going to be any of the names, as far as we're aware of, that were released earlier this year in April. So that excludes the likes of Samoa Joe, the Iconics, Mickie James, etc., Kalisto. Those names, as far as we're aware, it's not going to be them either because they're still waiting for their 90-day non-compete clause to expire as well. Chelsea Green is the same there. And also, of course, the report did mention, as I stressed, is that they referred to this person as he. So who could it be? Well, obviously there are some names last year that were released by WWE and still have yet to sign anywhere. So one name is Eric Rowan. Now, I don't see it being Eric Rowan, and I'll tell you why I don't see it being Eric Rowan, purely because of the phrasing that's been used in this report by PW Insider, by Mike Johnson. To say that Eric Rowan never got an opportunity in WWE just isn't true, is it? I mean, again, let's look at the verbiage used here. The verbiage and phrase used is never really got a fair chance during his time in WWE. Eric Rowan certainly, I mean, things might have not gone the way he wanted to, but there's no doubt he was used, substantially and did get an opportunity in WWE. It may not have ended and it may not have gone the way that certainly fans or himself would have liked, but he got a chance. Obviously, he was part of the Wyatt family, one of the biggest factions in recent WWE history with Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Braun Strowman, of course. Also, post-Wyatt family, he was a babyface on Monday Night Raw, went back to being a part of the Wyatt family for a bit, then was part of the Bludgeon Brothers with Luke Harper, God rest his soul, and they were tag team champions for a period of time. After that, when Luke Harper wasn't being used in WWE, when Luke Harper was on the sidelines, Eric Rowan was being used. Of course, he was the partner, the backup, the bodyguard for Daniel Bryan when Daniel Bryan was the WWE's Planet Champion, when you had the hemp bouts and all that kind of stuff. Eric Rowan was very much involved during that period. He was the intellectual equal of Daniel Bryan on SmackDown Live. That then span off to them being SmackDown Tag Team Champions, and then once Eric Rowan and Daniel Bryan split up, Eric Rowan was a dominating singles talent on SmackDown Live. At one point, people forget about this, at one point, Clash of Champions 2019, Eric Rowan defeated, yes, he defeated Roman Reigns. Given the booking of Roman Reigns at the moment as the top heel in WWE, the top heel on SmackDown, arguably one of the most popular and maybe best pro wrestlers in the world today, Eric Rowan defeated him on pay-per-view by pinning him in 2019. Now, I know, of course, people will say, well, Luke Harper interfered in that match, and that is true, but Eric Rowan was feuding with Roman Reigns back in 2019. That's getting a chance. That's getting an opportunity in the world of WWE and pro wrestling. So I don't think it's Rowan, although I think if it was Rowan, what a signing that would be for Impact Wrestling. It'd be massive. And that's a guy to really build the company around. That's a guy that's a very big deal, and some of his ideas are spectacular. I recall him doing an interview with Chris Van Vliet on Chris Van Vliet's YouTube channel and on his podcast, and they were speaking about, obviously, when you talk to Eric Rowan, a lot of people want to know about the spider, don't they? That awful, awful spider gimmick where for weeks and months Eric Rowan would carry around that big cage, and it was covered up, and people were going, what's in the cage? And there was all of these rumors about what it could be, and eventually it got to so long, that he was carrying around for so long that it was never going to live up to expectations, and then it was revealed to be a mechanical spider that got crushed like a week later by Drew McIntyre. Anyway, terrible idea, but what Eric Rowan's idea was actually quite interesting. He wanted to have the world's smallest woman, I think she's an actress, or the world's smallest actress, or something like that. I believe she was on American Horror Story or something like that. She'd been on one of those programs, and Eric Rowan pitched to bring her in to one TV and basically shoot a load of vignettes, shoot a load of promos, where essentially he would be carrying around the world's smallest woman inside of a cage, as crazy as that appears. And his rationale behind that is not that he was holding her, he'd captured her or anything like that. He was trying to save her. He was trying to shelter her from the dangers and the atrocities of the world. Think about that as a gimmick. Think about that as a character. How compelling is that? That's like Netflix stuff. So that was very creative, but obviously that got shot down and that didn't happen. So which was disappointing. But I don't think it's Eric Rowan. Other people, it could be Curtis Axel. Now, Curtis Axel's an interesting one. I did a video about a year ago. It was after Curtis Axel was released by WWE, and it was talking about how well he would fare in Impact Wrestling. I said he would be the perfect sign-in because I love a good pun. Do I think it'll be Curtis Axel? Again, looking at the phrase there, he never got the opportunity that he deserved, or he never really got a fair chance in WWE. Again, I would tend to disagree with that one. Obviously, Curtis Axel, Michael McGillicuddy, terrible, but there's a guy that was part of the Nexus as Michael McGillicuddy. Then he got repackaged as Curtis Axel, was a Paul Heyman guy. In reality, they didn't really have any interest, WWE, in getting him over. In reality, Curtis Axel was created and made into a Paul Heyman guy because they needed Paul Heyman on television to continue talking about Brock Lesnar while Brock Lesnar wasn't on television, and to begin the feud between Brock Lesnar and CM Punk. That's all that was about. They needed someone for CM Punk to face and for Paul Heyman to be on television, so they turned Curtis Axel into a Paul Heyman guy. Nevertheless, he became Intercontinental Champion. He was part of a team with Ryback. But then he was part of the Miz Taraj of The Miz, which was very entertaining and a great heated tag team with Bo Dallas there, and Maurice is part of the Miz Taraj on Raw in 2017. Also became a tag team with Bo Dallas in being the B team. They won the Raw Tag Team Championships off Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy. That's pretty significant as well, isn't it? So again, I think he got a fair chance, you would say. Maybe it didn't end the way that he would have wanted to, but I think that's a pretty fair chance, right? So I don't think it's Curtis Axel. Aiden English is another one. Now, that one is interesting. That one really is interesting. And I'll tell you why I think that one's interesting is because, did he get a fair chance? The argument there is no. The argument is there that he didn't get a fair chance in WWE. This was a guy that was an NXT Tag Team Champion with the Vaudevillains, and he gets called up to the main roster, and you've got your tag team partner in Simon Gotch. That never went well. He gets released. Aiden English stays, and he makes the most of what he can do. They were a popular tag team in NXT. My gosh, they were a popular tag team in NXT. But on the main roster, not so much. Eventually, he gets paired with Rusev, and then we have the whole Rusev Day, unbelievable, incredible experiment, where Rusev Day becomes arguably one of the most popular things in WWE. He's selling the most merchandise, and he's getting the crowd to chant Rusev Day. Bear in mind that when Rusev confronted Vince McMahon about this, saying, I'm one of the most popular guys on the show, they're chanting my name and my merchandise is sold out every single night. I'm selling more merchandise than Roman Reigns. Vince McMahon goes, they're chanting your name ironically. You do know that. They're essentially, they're mocking you. And everyone online went, what? I was never, ever chanting Rusev Day ironically. I was chanting it because I was a fan of the character. I was a fan of the gimmick. I don't think I've ever chanted anything ironically at a pro wrestling event. You chant because you want to support the character or you want to boo the character, all that kind of stuff. It's never ironic. The only thing that's ironic in the world of pro wrestling is saying that Kurt Angle sucks. That's the exception to the rule. That's always the exception to the rule. We don't change that. So Aiden English, he never got a fair shake, really, and he was very instrumental in Rusev Day. And that got over, and then Lana got involved, and then we had that really weird storyline where Aiden English feuded with Rusev, but he tried to sort of imply that he had an affair with Lana, and he didn't. And then he just kind of vanished, and then he became a commentator on 205 Live, which he was pretty good at, by the way. Not a bad commentator at all. He's got a great voice for it. So who's to say it might not be Aiden English? I know he's dipping his toe back into the pro wrestling landscape. He's based in Chicago. I think he's been doing some select indie events in Chicago. We've spoken about maybe the need for another announcer in Impact Wrestling. Matt Stryker's away for a couple of weeks. Josh Matthews is filling in. But I've also said that I would love to see more Ronaldo in Impact Wrestling. But who's to say Aiden English can't join that broadcast booth as well? Aiden English is a possibility. Alexander Wolf, as I mentioned, I don't know if the timing's fully right yet. As far as I'm aware, I think, and I might be wrong, but I think it's mid-June his contract expires, so I don't think it's him. Obviously, people are going to say Andrade. I mean, you could argue, given the talent of Andrade, he never did get a fair chance in WWE. It's debatable. Again, obviously, people will look at, well, the guy was United States champion, all that kind of stuff. But looking how it ended with Andrade in WWE, this guy was desperate to wrestle. He was desperate to return. He wanted to wrestle creatively. Did he ever get creatively fulfilled in WWE? Did he ever reach the levels of people that watched him and were fans of Andrade in NXT? Did they ever see that sort of level of success in WWE? And the answer would be no. This was a guy as well. He got drafted from NXT to SmackDown, and then once he was on SmackDown for ages, he just wrestled Rey Mysterio in unbelievable match after unbelievable match after unbelievable match. But they had no story for him. No, he was just kind of there. And it was the same on Raw. They had the whole deal where he beat Rey Mysterio for the United States Championship, was the US champion for a while, was with Zelina Vega in a tag team with Angel Garza, but they just faced the Street Profits every single week on Raw. They didn't really ever do anything with Andrade. So despite him being the United States champion, despite him winning that in Madison Square Garden on, was it Boxing Day? The day after Christmas? Something like that, right? Did he ever get a fair chance in WWE? That is debatable. So I suppose maybe Andrade, who knows? I'm not sure what Impact Wrestling's relationship is like with AAA. I think it's reasonable. Obviously, Kenny Omega is the unified Impact World Champion. We know that at Triple Mania later this year, Andrade is going to be facing Kenny Omega for the AAA Mega Championship. So if they wanted to have Andrade come in and maybe work a few dates up to Slammiversary, tie it in with the Triple Mania match against Kenny Omega for the AAA Mega Championship, they could do that. So maybe we don't rule out Andrade in that one. That's certainly interesting. And finally, Steve Cutler is definitely a possibility. Steve Cutler is a name that when he was released by WWE earlier this year, that I said that was a possibility because obviously he has ties with Deonna Purrazzo. He's Deonna Purrazzo's partner, and you certainly could imply that he never did get a fair chance in WWE, certainly on the main roster, because this is a guy that the Forgotten Sons were a gimmick that they did in NXT, which of course was Steve Cutler, Wesley Blake, Jackson Riker. For me, it was just I never really connected with it that much. It was just never for me. But they had good matches, and they were a faction, and they had a significant amount of TV time. Called up to SmackDown last year during the pandemic, and then obviously Jackson Riker puts his foot in his mouth. He does the tweet about politics at the time, and they get taken off of television because nobody wanted to work with Jackson Riker. Had nothing to do with Steve Cutler and Wesley Blake, by the way, and Jackson Riker's the only guy still with WWE, and as of Monday, they were trying to turn this guy babyface on Raw. Why? You know, basically, shrug, I don't know, because how on earth is this guy going to be a babyface, especially when live crowds are returning? They're going to boo the hell out of him, depending, I guess, what state he's in. I don't know. I don't see that one. They're trying to play off, obviously, his military background, which, you know, total respect from me, but WWE's, that's going to be a tough one. So Steve Cutler, of course, no one wants to work with Jackson Riker. Then the Forgotten Sons, you know, Wesley Blake and Steve Cutler were literally forgotten, I guess. by the heat that went with them, so they didn't appear on TV for ages. Then they do eventually appear on TV at the very end of last year. They were the Knights of the Lone Wolf of King Corbin on SmackDown. The New Year's Eve happens. There's a New Year's Eve party. Steve Cutler attends it with Deonna Purrazzo. I think other names that were there were the likes of Ricochet, Casey Catanzaro, Rich Swann, Su Yung was also there during that party. Steve Cutler contracts COVID at that party. Vince McMahon throws a big hissy fit. How dare this guy? How dare this guy contract COVID during a pandemic? Whilst I understand that maybe he should have been taking extra precautions and, maybe if he was asked by his company, it's a very difficult situation, but Steve Cutler is one of the only people, I think maybe the only person in WWE that got fired because he contracted COVID, which is crazy when you think about it. So he was fired and the Knights of the Lone Wolf gimmick was dropped. Now, again, that was back in January time, I think, January, February time. So the 90 days would have expired at this point. So he would be free to go to Impact Wrestling if he wanted to. I think most people expected him to. I certainly did. If you look at the other options available right now, is he going to go to AEW? Don't see that. Is he going to go to Ring of Honor? Maybe. Is he going to go to the NWA? They would want him. But I think in reality, if you look at what options are available to him, I think Impact would want him to come in. I think he does have a point to prove. He's got a great look, a great physique, and obviously he's partners with Deonna Purrazzo, which does help get his foot in the door. So if it was Steve Cutler, I think that one would be a possibility. Again, we don't know who it is, so we'll have to wait and see. But it's certainly going to be interesting. And to answer some people's questions, no, I don't think it's going to be the Velveteen Dream because I think that guy definitely got a chance in WWE. So I don't think that will be the Velveteen Dream. Speaking of other names, though, Lady Frost apparently is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be tonight, but was at the most recent set of Impact Wrestling television tapings. This is the report from Fightful Select, which is Fightful's Patreon service, so be sure to check that out and subscribe. They're doing just unbelievable work recently. They really are. I did a post earlier today on social media, and it's probably worth repeating here, frankly, that Fightful, certainly over the course of the last few months, but definitely in the last 10 days or so, 2 weeks, just killing it with their reporting, accurate reporting, first to break stories, fact checked, sourced, everything, and they just do, specifically Sean Ross Sapp just does good journalism. That's it. Does good journalism, which unfortunately is a really high standard in the pro wrestling journalism industry at the moment. There are lots of great sources out there, but Sean Ross Sapp for me is right up there at the moment, and I find it just fascinating that Sean Ross Sapp, starts to break some really important stories and fact checks these stories and is first and is exclusive, but does good journalism. And yet some people now, over the course of the last few days, some of the attacks the guy's got from other journalists on other websites is frankly disgusting, just for some form of clout. If there's a new top guy or there's a guy that's doing good work, what do we have to do? God, we got to break him down. We got to break him down. Why? Because he's got to make us feel better about ourselves. It's jealousy. That's what it is at the end of the day, and jealousy will never prosper or succeed. The only way to succeed and prosper in any of this, any form of life, pro wrestling, outside pro wrestling, work, whatever, is hard work and consistency. That's it. So credit to all the guys at Fightful and Sean Ross Sapp. He's doing an excellent job. Anyway, the Fightful Select report says, kind of backs up what PW Insider has said, that Impact Wrestling keeps adding new faces with each taping, and they didn't stop with the most recent set of TV tapings. Fightful has been told that multiple new faces were around at the May TV tapings, and were able to confirm one name specifically. That name specifically is independent wrestling standout Lady Frost, who worked the tapings in a short match. Now, they're not currently aware, Fightful, if she has been signed full-time to the company or has even signed any kind of a deal. Impact Wrestling does a lot of handshake deals, a lot of per taping agreements, so we don't know if she has signed a contract or anything like that. Lady Frost has also worked for AEW, Ring of Honor, and beyond, and WWE shows since 2018. In addition, there were a couple of new male wrestlers there, at least one used and one not. As I mentioned, there is, according to PW Insider, someone making a debut in terms of a vignette tonight, so that's certainly interesting. Look, Lady Frost, if you've watched a bit of AEW Dark, she's been appearing on there. She appeared on the November 24 episode of AEW Dark. She teamed with Genocide in a tag team match which lost to Diamante and Ivelisse. Of course, Ivelisse is now no longer with the company. She made her AEW singles debut on the December 1st episode of AEW Dark, losing a match to Red Velvet. So she's done a couple of Dark matches for AEW. As I mentioned, big standout on the independent scene. Was on an episode of Monday Night Raw, I think on March 26th episode of 2018, in a match where she was defeated by Asuka. So you might recognize her face. I've seen a couple of matches here and there on social media. I will be totally honest, I'm not totally totally familiar with all of her work. Again, I've seen some of the matches she's done on Dark, and I did a video earlier today talking about the WWE releases. Where were they going to go next? That was the big question. Where are some of these releases going to go next? And I spoke about Ruby Riott, and I spoke about Lana and Santana Garrett. I said Lana, I think, is going to AEW. Santana Garrett, I think she would be a good addition to maybe Impact Wrestling, but certainly Ring of Honor, NWO would be interested. Ruby Riott, I said, would be perfect for Impact Wrestling because for me, and if you've watched any of the Impact Wrestling videos I've done here on the channel, you'll know what I'm going to say. But I think that WWE does have the best women's division in the world, despite just the amount of people and certainly females that have been released since April. It's something ridiculous, maybe 11 female wrestlers have been released since April. It's crazy. But I have said that I think WWE's women's division is the best in the world, purely because I guess the depth of the roster that they have in terms of Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, if you lump them all together. But second to that, for me, would be Impact Wrestling, because of the presentation they have of women's wrestling. They've not only got a women's championship, Knockouts championship, they've got Knockouts tag team championships. It's a cornerstone of the division. It's always been a priority for them. They have main events. They have on television, they have TV special main events. They have pay-per-view main events. Impact Wrestling are very considerate, and they know what they've got in terms of their impressive Knockouts division, and in terms of the booking, in terms of the talent, all that kind of stuff. Impact Wrestling's Knockouts division is very, very, very strong. Very strong. And obviously there are rumors about names coming in, whether it's Chelsea Green, the Iconics, Mickie James, now possibly Ruby Riott. Lady Frost, if she comes in as well, it just adds to a great depth that's already there when it comes to Impact Wrestling and their Knockouts division, which is very exciting. So, again, we don't know the full situation with Lady Frost. She isn't the only new name that was at the latest set of Impact Wrestling television tapings, but it's another name, and it's another example of Impact Wrestling investing in their women's division, and their women's division being a priority and cornerstone of their product, which is great to see. Finally, of course, as I mentioned, it is an episode of Impact Wrestling tonight, so I do want to talk about a couple of things briefly. We'll talk about this far, far more in depth tomorrow and over the course of the next few days after Impact, but a few things, obviously, previewing tonight's episode of Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. We have the 60-minute X-Division Championship Iron Man match. Yes, I am really excited for this one. This one kicks off on Before the Impact, which is Josh Alexander defending against TJP. Of course, this is following TJP's pinfall victory over Josh Alexander. The two rivals are going to settle the score once and for all when they compete in the first ever 60-minute Iron Man match for the X-Division Championship. The history will kick off on this week's edition of Before the Impact and conclude at the beginning of Impact tonight. Now, obviously, I think most people expect Josh Alexander to retain here, but what is important to stress is we spoke about this several times here on the channel prior to the match being announced. It was, once again, a report from Fightful Select mentioned that so many people that were at the most recent set of Impact Wrestling television tapings were talking about this match, hyping it up as a real special match, one of the best matches they've seen arguably ever during their time of Impact Wrestling, and a really exciting match. So I think everyone's excited because it's a special attraction, it's a special presentation, but also there's a lot of hype around this match. Now, one could argue, are the expectations too high? I don't know. I don't think so. I think this one's going to be just phenomenal, and Josh Alexander's portfolio of tremendous X-Division Championship matches are going to continue. So I'm really excited about this one. We have a main event tonight of Moose versus Sami Callihan on Impact Wrestling as well. Of course, this follows the loss to the Good Brothers last week in the tag team main event. Obviously, this continues to build to Against All Odds, where Moose challenges for the Impact World Championship against Kenny Omega. Sami Callihan features into it primarily because, of course, he was taken out by the Good Brothers under siege at the request of Don Callis. Again, there's lots of different moving parts. There's Moose versus Kenny Omega, there's Sami Callihan and the Good Brothers, and there's Don Callis. How is this all going to come together? So that's interesting to see as well. We've got Kojima. Yes, we've got the Impact Wrestling in-ring debut of Kojima against Cody Deaner, or just Deaner, of Violent by Design. Now, of course, Satoshi Kojima will face Joe Doring Against All Odds, which is going to be just so much fun. I mean, they are going to beat the hell out of each other, and I, for one, cannot wait about that. But we're going to get a better look at Kojima tonight on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. Given that it's his in-ring debut, I would be stunned if Kojima lost, so I think Kojima just destroys Deaner tonight, or at the very least they Violent by Design get involved. I would hate to see a non-finish. I think given that it's the debut, and given that there will be some fans of Impact that have never seen Kojima wrestle before, it's in their best interest to get this guy over and actually, you know, make them more aware of what this guy can do inside of a ring, build up the match against Joe Doring. So I expect Kojima to win. We have one final opportunity to regain the Knockouts Tag Team Championships if you're Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering, because they're facing off against Fire and Flavor. Now, this is certainly interesting because the word going around the Impact Wrestling locker room is that Jordynne Grace is perceived as the weak link of the team, and this has her more determined than ever. Will Grace and Ellering become the Knockouts Tag Team Champions once again, or will Fire and Flavor prove while they are the most dominant tag teams in the Knockouts Tag Team division? I think we're going to obviously see the champions retain here, and I think this is going to be a heel turn of sorts. Now, one would assume it's going to be Jordynne Grace on Rachel Ellering. Maybe they flip the script, maybe they don't, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rachel Ellering and Jordynne Grace are enemies after this one, so that's going to be fascinating to see. And finally, we have a tables match. Yes, a tables match. Jake Something versus Rohit Raju. Jake Something and Rohit were once best of friends after coming up together in the pro wrestling industry. Their respective paths led them to both Impact Wrestling, but that's where everything has changed. Rohit has become jealous of Jake and accused him of receiving preferential treatment from management in Impact Wrestling. Rohit would stop at nothing to prove that he is the superior athlete, blindsiding Jake with a backstage attack and even costing him an opportunity at the Impact World Championship. Tonight on Impact, we find out who the better man really is as Jake Something and Rohit Raju collide in Jake's signature stipulation, easy for me to say, a tables match. This should be a lot of fun. I'm a fan of Rohit. I'm a huge fan of Jake Something. I think the guy's got so much potential. Great look. Real great look. And I think it was a fantastic idea to move him and Dina away from each other. Dina's doing fine as the guy that takes all the bumps in Violent by Design. And Jake Something's just a hoss. He is beyond talented. Great look. I think he's got a great future in Impact. They're continuing to get him over as a big single star. And I think he wins against Rohit tonight. But Stack's showing a very exciting one for Impact Wrestling on AXS TV tonight. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we have spoken about today? Who do you think is the former WWE star to debut tonight on Impact? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, gut the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.